Howdy, guys. We're back with more Land Talk Podcast. We're on episode 11, and now we're going to talk about some deeds. So, obviously, when you're buying a property, you're going to get a deed to it. So, kind of want to cover some of the intricacies there and kind of what a deed does. And I've still got Tassie with me to help me on that. So, Tassie, give me kind of the rundown here of what is a deed.
So, a deed is the transfer of ownership from one person to another. Most typically, you see a warranty deed, a general warranty deed. Mm-hmm. That's the most common from person to person. But truthfully, it sets out, like this person is conveying their interest to this person. And typically, they don't show the sales price. The standard, I believe, in Texas, as you know, I'm not an attorney, but I believe it's just $10 another good and valuable consideration is what it says.
Sure.
Other than if you're getting a loan, of course, it discloses that.
Right.
That's the most common we see.
Right. So you kind of touched on it, but what are the required elements of a deed that make it effective?
So valid signature, valid notary, valid legal description being contained in the body of the deed or attached to the document.
Right.
If you fail to include the exhibit when it gets filed, we have no way to know what it was that was conveyed other than what it briefly states on the front page, which is a problem.
Right. So you're going to have party A and party B, and then you're going to have addresses. You're going to have some consideration, which is the $10.
Correct.
And I know there's a bunch of language in there to have and hold forever. What's kind of the...
If you hadn't asked, I could probably tell you, but it's the warranty, that they warrant the title.
They warrant the title from all defects.
Correct.
But then also, is there language in there that holds them harmless from some things too, or...
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I know I've read that somewhere, but I don't know where I read it at.
It's been a while since I've actually sat and read one.
Right. So as far as a deed, so I know we get into mineral rights, we get into water rights, we get into, I guess you can get into wind and solar and aggregate, right? There's multiple kinds of rights.
Yeah.
So in a deed, if somebody's keeping a right, that's going to be in a deed as well, correct?
Correct. So they're typically reserved. There's usually a reservation section of a deed that will show any reservation. So anything that the seller is keeping unto themselves.
Right. So that's a reservation from conveyance. So you have to assume if it's not reserved from conveyance, anything that they own prior to that is going to go to the next person.
Correct.
Right.
So if they owned it up to the point where that deed is filed and they did not reserve it, then it is understood that it conveys.
Right. And then kind of jumping back to the last episode, if someone reserves minerals or groundwater or wind, solar, aggregate, that's going to show up in that title commitment, right, as an exception from coverage. Yes. Right.
Yes.
So
now when you get into mineral rights, water rights sometimes, there is a general mineral exception in Schedule B that says, the minerals are not covered. Our stance at our office is to, if we find it, we list it. Not everyone does the same. There are title companies out there that don't feel as though they have the mineral, the standard general exception, and they just don't list anything.
Right.
I like to put it all out there. You do with it what you want. Of course, it's not a full depiction of the minerals.
Sure.
But it gives you a good idea of if there's leases, whatever's outstanding, how much might be outstanding. You can tell that by just reading the reservations.
But when somebody reserves anything in a deed, you're making the general assumption they have the right to do it, which may be incorrect.
Correct.
Right. So
unless they have had a mineral run done. Right. I know that.
Right. So I know we've had people reserve minerals and they're probably fairly certain they don't own any of them, but they're saying if I own them, I want to reserve them. They're going to reserve 100% of the minerals, but that would only be 100% of the minerals they own. So all that being said, just because somebody reserves something, maybe they don't own it all. So I think, and that's kind of maybe another conversation for when we get into mineral rights, but I think it's interesting how you can make a reservation of conveyance and it doesn't have to be correct.
Right.
So that's just kind of some tip to note in the future. And why you should pay attention to Schedule B, that'll outline some things a little clearer. But obviously, like when it comes to mineral rights, you should probably get a landman or an attorney that specializes in minerals to track those down. But that's kind of a story for another day. So what about, this is kind of a buzzword, you hear about deed restrictions. So deed restrictions go in the deed, right?
Correct.
Okay, so those would just be attached. Is that just an extra exhibit or?
So they can be attached. They can be, placed in the middle of the deed. If it is a platted subdivision, a lot of people will file the restrictions totally separate and make them, uniformly applicable to all the lots in that subdivision. So it's kind of it restricts the usage of the property.
Right.
You can't build within 25 feet of
Yeah.
the roadway.
Right.
No commercial activity.
And those are put on the deed for what reason? Like why would you put them in the deed versus having an outside agreement?
First of all, you would want to make sure it's of record.
Mm-hmm.
That we have run into that in the past. To me, it being in the deed, it's obviously part of the pending transaction, and you're putting the buyer on notice.
Right.
They are accepting it. They are acknowledging it. It's part of their deed. Typically, buyers signed and or initial a deed.
And obviously, putting it on the deed makes it permanent. I mean, there may be some ways to get rid of those later, but it runs with the deed, and the deed runs with the property.
Yep. So when you find it,
you kind of can't get rid of it.
It goes forward.
Right. What are some reasons you should use a title company to prepare a deed over just doing one on your own?
I have to be honest and say I would never tell anyone to draft a deed themselves. If you go to a title company or go to an attorney, usually a deed prep fee, if you provide them the basic information to do the deed, the document preparation is, $175, $200.
Right.
And then it's done and it's done correctly. The risk in doing it yourself is, getting a form, attempting to fill it out as best you know how, inaccurate legal descriptions, no mailing addresses, no actual, meets and bounds attached, and not being signed or notarized. It could be a multitude of things that could be wrong, and it doesn't come up until the buyer goes to sell the property some years later, and now they're selling and it's going through a title company, and we've got a problem.
Yeah, and I feel like with any legal document, like one word being there or not being there may change the whole intent of that document.
True.
We had a deal recently to where somebody just threw one together and put like a picture of a hand-drawn map or a screenshot off of a computer of where this property is, which doesn't tell you what you're buying, and no one else can, I guess, readily decipher that. So I know that's a big deal.
Yes.
So who typically signs a deed?
Typically the deed is signed by the seller. So sellers, if it's an entity, the appropriate representatives of the entity, the officers, directors, whoever it may be, managers, members.
So when you get a deed and you're reviewing it, hopefully before closing or at closing, I guess there is some options to have that change, right? So you could get an attorney that says, hey, we want to tweak this language and we want it. And I guess that's my point, that it can be changed.
Oh, yeah.
I guess there's kind of a general form to follow, but there could be, I guess as long as both parties are good with it and it holds up all the normal elements, I guess you could change that or tweak it.
Yes, a lot of times it is tweaked. The buyer has an attorney, and the attorney that drafted the deed just used a standard form, real estate form, and the buyer's attorney doesn't like it, so they tweak the language. It happens.
Right. So when everybody signs the deed, and let's say the seller signs it, the property's conveyed, where does that deed go after that?
Goes to the county clerk to be recorded.
Right. So and is that the original, and the original stays there?
So yes, it used to. Now we e-record.
Okay.
So the original now, because we do the e-recording, stays with us, and then we return it when we issue the title policy.
Right. And so I guess when you get that deed, that's one of those things. You shouldn't have to keep it, but it's good practice. I mean, I think it's always good to keep that. So we'll kind of jump into the typical deeds that you see conveying properties. So what are kind of the normal ones, and what are some things about those that I guess make them different from each other?
So for title insurance purposes, there's certain things that we look at in a deed. Typically, like a special warranty deed is usually, an entity owned property, or a deed from a person that owns property that has limited knowledge of the property, I guess. Quitclaim deeds are typically, for most purposes, a no-go in Texas.
Right.
It's very difficult to get title insurance.
Yeah.
If a quitclaim deed was the only deed that was provided to convey ownership. Now, there are times where they are acceptable, but it's not typically in a buy-sell transaction.
Right.
Let's see, a special warranty deed, the general warranty deed.
So let's talk about general warranty deeds for a minute. So general warranty deeds are the most common, right? I guess most widely accepted. That's typically what a lender will accept a special warranty deed for the most part, but
most of them,
I guess general warranty deeds are the most common. So when they call it a warranty deed, what is being warranted, right?
The title.
So the seller is warranting that title to the buyer, correct? So that's the most coverage. That's the most complex. I guess it's the most encompassing warranty.
It's the best protection, I believe, as a title insurance guru that you can get. That's what I would want personally if I were buying property. I would want a general warranty deed. It's got the warranty in there. That's the key. It gives you some leverage, should something come up.
And basically it's a seller vouching for that property and warranting that. So what percentage of deeds does a general warranty deed make up for you?
So general warranty deed and general warranty deed with vendor's lien, I would say probably 90%.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably 90%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously that vendor's lien is just things that are added in addition to the deed, securing a note for a lender or
for purchase money.
Right.
Yes.
And then obviously we can get into promissory notes. I mean, that's what secures the loan for a lender. But as far as deeds, general warranty is what we see, and you probably see most of the time. So let's go special warranty deed next. So if a general warranty deed has the most encompassing warranty or coverage, if you want to call it that, what is different from the special warranty deed?
If I'm not mistaken, and I very well may be, because deeds are not really my area other than us reading them, I think it's maybe the warranty is a little more limited.
Yeah.
Because their knowledge is more limited, because it's not like an owner-occupied property, is what I'm thinking. Yeah,
and kind of when I think of special warranty deeds is like I'm warranting the property from when I owned it forward, and I'm not warranting back in time before I didn't, because I don't have knowledge of that. So that's when I think of a special warranty, which I'm not an attorney either, but I think I'm gonna vouch for what I know of the property based on when I owned it, but I'm not vouching for something in the past. And then you talked about quitclaim. So what does a quitclaim do? And I know it's a kind of terrible option. It's a last ditch thing, but what does a quitclaim do deed wise?
So to me, a quitclaim deed would be something where somebody is conveying you something, but they're not saying for certain whether they own an interest or not.
Right, and it's basically there's no warranty, right? It's called a quitclaim deed. It's not called a quitclaim warranty deed because it's not warranting anything.
It has zero warranty.
So I guess in my brain, just based on the name, you're stopping your claim to the property if you had one, but there's no guarantee that you even had one to begin with. So, and I guess we see those when kind of all else fails. I mean, that's kind of a last ditch way to convey a property, right? And then what about a deed without warranty? We don't see those much, but I know we've talked about those before. So, I mean, that's kind of the same thing. I guess it's a little better than a quitclaim.
Yes.
Yeah, in a sense.
They're usually done. I'm trying to think of a scenario where I've seen one recently, and I think it was like from an entity, like a city, conveying property.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of
it's a very rare thing.
I'm trying to think of the last time we talked about doing a deed without warranty, and it was a deal recently, but I think it was a way to transfer some interest, but at the same time, you're not warranting that interest either. So,
so it's better than a quitclaim. Still better than a quitclaim. Right. For sure.
And then kind of some that we run across otherwise would be a sheriff's deed, right?
Yes.
So when you see sheriff's deed, what does that mean if it's a sheriff's deed?
For us, a sheriff's deed is tax sale. You bought the property on a tax sale.
Right. And so what are the limitations, like a sheriff's deed, what are the limitations of those? I mean, they come with some kind of red tape with them. What are those usually?
Yeah, so I know that there's like a right of redemption on the property that's determined by a homestead, or was it homestead, or did it have ag, and how are the parties? There's multiple variables. But for us as a title insurance company, the last time I had to check, it was the underwriters did not want us to issue title policies until 4 years had lapsed.
Right, and that's regardless of the normal right of redemption. Because I think we talked about this. Like, I think the right of redemption on like an ag exempt property or a homestead, what is it, like 2 years maybe?
I can't ever.
It's 1 or 2 years or something.
1 or 2 years, and you pay.
You could pay to get it back, basically, pay the interest and whatever. Right. And then I think on a non-ag exempt, non-homestead property, maybe it's like 6 months or something. I know it's shorter.
Right.
But I guess y'all were saying even though you know that those right of redemptions may be over, you still want to wait 4 years.
Yes.
I guess just really let the dust settle and make sure that there's nothing else going to come about. And I guess at 4 years, the risk is low enough for for y'all to ensure that. So
that's more than ample time for somebody to have noticed that it was sold and
come back and
not to mention the liens that are not all necessarily wiped out by, for title insurance purposes. Not all liens are wiped out by a tax sale.
Right. So kind of tied it back to our last episode. I mean, as far as deeds, I know you run into missing deeds. Sometimes you're gonna, when you're looking at chain of titles, you see deeds that are referenced to somebody else and maybe they're not there. But I guess all that's to say that as we move forward in time, hopefully that gets less and less common. I feel like with technology and the fact that probably people are using more title insurance now than they probably were 100 years ago. I guess you're hoping that some of those deeds will stop going missing with time. But I guess that's the main thing, is that if you have a deed, it's obviously the instrument to convey this property from one or another, but also other people have to be able to find it later to be able to use it. So, anything else you have on deeds there? I mean, what's...
just because you have a deed, and, maybe it was... you were going through grandma's stuff and you found a deed and it didn't have any recording markings on it, and so you go record it and it conveys interest from grandma to you. Mm-hmm. That most likely is not going to be accepted because the person that executed the deed is deceased, and so we don't know as a title insurance company if there was an underlying agreement about a loan or something that was fulfilled, but you just came across the deed and she's deceased, and so you can go file it and she's not here to argue that fact.
Right.
So we're more than likely not going to accept that.
So just because, let's say you have a property with a problem, just you can't file a deed and fix a lot of things is what is kind of one of the things. Like, a deed is not automatically, I guess, enforceable or valid, right? I think there's a lot of things that, as you know, that go with it that would make that deed either valid or invalid. So, and I think we've dealt with a property that I bought personally to where there was a section of property conveyed. I don't know if you remember, this little triangle piece in the back of this property, and anyway, we were missing the deed for it, and then conveniently the people found it, and then it was all signed by people who are now dead. So, it gets kind of complicated as to, is it legitimate, is it not? So all that being said, if you get a property conveyed to you with a deed, don't wait to record it. Don't sit on it.
Don't file it immediately.
Go record it. And it's going to make it.
Being a public record is the key.
Right. And I guess how does you were talking about recording documents with people who are deceased. I guess in a perfect world, deeds are recorded in the correct order.
Correct.
Right. But I guess y'all do find some that are recorded out of order. And I guess sometimes those are a problem. Maybe sometimes they're not. I don't know. But
yeah, most of the ones that we used to see that were filed out of order were, substantially older and further back in the chain of title. So it's not quite as alarming. You could clearly tell that the dates, they were signed in the right order, just filed in the wrong order. So you kind of use your judgment, how current did this occur? How many good deeds do you have moving forward? Sometimes people inadvertently put the wrong legal description in their deed and, convey away something they never owned to begin with. They didn't even think they owned it. That wasn't their intent, but they messed up and put the wrong legal in the deed. And so, it can be a problem for both the person that owns that property and then you as the person who deeded it away.
Yeah. And I think all that's being said, it's just important to get help when you write a deed. Don't do it on your own. An attorney can do it. You can go to a title company who uses an attorney to do it. But either way, best practice is to get an attorney to do it and base it on hopefully a recent survey, but some sort of legal description that tells you where that property is, what it is, where it is, all those things. So I think that's the main thing. Just make sure to get help. If you use any broker agent, they should point you in the same direction that I'm pointing you. But that's all to say that a title company is very helpful and useful. And one of the things they can help with is deeds.
Yes,
so,
for sure.
Well, that wraps up episode 11 for us. Tassie, thanks for joining us today.
Of course.
Super helpful, and we always enjoy working with you. But we'll catch you on episode 12. Thanks.